Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for being here with us today. My name is Marty Anderson. I'm RefugePoint's Director of International Programs and our representative in Geneva. And I have been given the privilege of giving just a couple of introductory remarks here today. On a planning call for this event the other day, I joked that we could probably rename the title of this speaking series not voices from the field, but something more like the voices of those who know best. And in this case, that's definitely not me. So in that spirit, I'll try to keep my comments brief and then hand it over to those who truly do know best about the program. We're here today to learn about RefugePoint's still newish economic mobility program. And I'll make just two quick comments about it. First, I'd like to highlight just how far we've come with this program. We started 3 years ago, literally from scratch, with no staffing, no resources, and really not even much of a conception about what ultimately refugee economic mobility to Canada would look like. But we had good partnerships, we had great support from our donor community, and we had a general sense of eagerness and optimism to help build this new pathway for refugees to access solutions. Then, just when we thought the program was hitting its stride, the pandemic forced us to rethink and even halt a lot of what we were doing, and at the same time, forced an interminable wait for our first successful job candidates, many of whom were working their way through the Canadian immigration process at exactly that time. Yet, as of now, we've helped nearly 100 refugees in Kenya apply for jobs in Canada. Most of those 100 are still in various stages of the recruitment process, but more than 30 have received job offers from employers in Canada. And while most of those 30 are still in various stages of the immigration process, 4 have recently arrived in Canada, as we'll hear more about today. And I frame those numbers that way, in that stepwise sort of way, to try to convey that not only have we had some successes, but we've, in the process, built a system for an ongoing pipeline that we hope will lead to many more successes to come. The only other point I wanted to make is to emphasize what an absolute pleasure and honor it is to work alongside our team in Nairobi on this project. It is so clear every step of the way that they are so genuinely invested in the success of the program, and not just in the program as a whole, but also in the success of each and every one of our clients in this program. Most of all, I'd like to say a big thanks to Janet Uma for leading the team and the process to build this new economic mobility program. I'm pretty sure Janet is the only staff person who has been with this program from day one until today. And so if my characterization is accurate, and this is really about hearing from the people who know best, then there's truly no one better for me to pass the mic to now. So with that, Janet, over to you, and thanks so much for everything.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. It's such a pleasure for me to speak about this program, not just present my views and observations, but the whole team. As Marty said, I'm fortunate enough to lead a team from Nairobi that has been working on this project since 2018, when it was a pilot, and now when it is a fully fledged project. It's been the honor of my life, the honor of my career, to think in 2018 when we were asking, is it even possible, to see where the program is today when you're asked, the question is, how do we scale this up? So this is such a pleasure for us to share our experience and observations with you. And we fondly refer to this program and say it takes a village. And literally that speaks to our experience implementing it, but more importantly, to the depth and the breadth of partnerships that Marty spoke about that have really been the strength of this program and have gotten us to where we are today. Our voices in the field webinar today will focus some of the voices. We'll try to bring you some perspectives. Not all partners are here, but we will try and bring in the perspective of staff who have worked with our clients, and we'll bring perspectives from clients who are in the process and those who have succeeded through the process. And we will also hear from a very key ally and partner in Canada. So welcome. And I have a panel. We have a panel of distinguished panelists. I will invite them to unmute themselves and introduce themselves. They will speak about their involvement with the program and where they are. John Bosco, kindly unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the participants.
My name is Muhire Jean Bosco Rekayo. I am a refugee from Rwanda, living here in Kenya since 1994. By profession, I am a nurse, and I am glad that my nursing skills has helped me to get employment here in Kenya. And this has allowed me to cater financially for my family and for myself. And I am happy also that I participate actively in improving and maintaining healthcare of our community here in Nairobi. Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you, John Bosco. I will now kindly invite Bahati to unmute herself and introduce herself to us.
Thank you, Janet. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us here. My name is Bahati Ernestine Hategekimana. I am still getting used to referring to myself as a former refugee, but I am that now, originally from Rwanda, but having lived most of my life in Kenya. I am currently working and based in Nova Scotia, Canada, and I am a trained nurse.
Thank you, Bahati. Allow me to invite Valentine to unmute herself, tell us about herself and her involvement with this project.
Hi, everyone, and thank you very much, Janet. My name is Valentine Gary, an assistant with the Economic Mobility Program Pathways Program in Nairobi, working since January 2021 with a team, very hardworking and energetic, creative, really just a very dynamic team of people who we call ourselves, well, the boots on the ground. We're working directly with the refugee candidates, and I'll speak more on that later. But for now, just to mention how much it's an honor to have you all here listening to our experiences and participating in this all-important conversation. Thank you. Thank you,
Valentine. Last but not least, I will invite Sarah Westman. She can introduce herself and let us know about her involvement with the project.
Great, thanks, Janet. I've followed a bit of a convoluted path and had a few different roles through this. I originally am an employment and labor lawyer by trade, but stepped away from my law practice a few years ago to step into the economic development space in Nova Scotia, supporting local employers with a variety of issues, one of which was workforce development and trying to solve problems around labor shortages. So in that capacity, I oversaw the first pilot of what's called a community-driven approach to labor mobility and worked closely with RefugePoint and our government and other partners to kind of work through the kinks in the model of labor mobility. More recently, I've joined the Shapiro Foundation, which is an international organization that works on a variety of refugee serving projects, and I'm kind of their Canadian boots on the ground as we explore other regions and also other workforce sectors that might be a fit for labor mobility. And then finally, I'm pleased to share that I recently joined the Canadian Board of Directors of RefugePoint as well.
Thank you. All right, so before we delve into the discussions, bring forth our experience and observations, we felt that it would be useful to just provide a bit of framing and context around our work here in Nairobi, how we identify candidates, work with them until they get to the place where Bahati is, where they are working and contributing to their communities in Canada. To give us that perspective, which is a RefugePoint staff perspective on how we conduct this program, allow me to invite Valentine to unmute her microphone and please take us through some context by summarizing how we work to identify candidates for job opportunities in Canada, speak about some intersections based on your observations around other solutions such as self-reliance, and mention some EMPP principles that underpin our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. So with that kind of introduction, I think I'll just dive right into it and say that the program is tailored to meet the needs that have been identified. So talent or worker or occupational needs. So far, we've been working with Canada, so we'll be referencing them quite a bit. And just to say that for this particular program with the pilot, and so far we've been working for the healthcare sector, finding continued care assistants among other workers, as that has been the identified need from Canada. So what happens is we send out a call for applications to Nairobi, Kakuma, and Dadaab. And this is definitely with a lot of help from UNHCR, and we thank them for that. Once we receive the applications, we take the candidates through a series of screening stages. There are quite many, but in all of these, we're just trying to get the most suitable candidates for the employers. And we're also trying to be really careful that the fit is not just good for the employer, but that it's also really good for the refugee. In this case, we then are careful to employ a protective lens so that, you know, the candidates who go on the economic mobility, that is the best pathway for them. We do end up submitting CVs to the employer, and then they get to select and shortlist who has qualified and come back to us, and then we definitely help to facilitate the interviewing process and just give our support with the candidates in the immigration process all the way until they leave to Canada. I have mentioned the protective lens as one of our guiding principles, and we just basically want to make sure that nobody is getting hurt by this, or rather nobody is getting disadvantaged by traveling through an economic mobility pathway as opposed to the traditional resettlement. The second principle that I'll mention, basically it's just that the program really ties into the work that RefugePoint is doing towards self-reliance. And I know that we are not the only ones doing this work. And I would like to note with appreciation so many of the other organizations and partners who have made significant contributions to self-reliance. And here I'm talking about people who've offered scholarships and livelihood opportunities to refugees, both in the urban and in the camp setting. We have seen most of these refugees coming to us with education that they have acquired through these scholarships, through experience that they have acquired through these opportunities. And we can now see how this is tying into economic mobility and supporting economic mobility. So we really appreciate that, and we appreciate noting the impact that that has had. I think I can now speak about how much it's been a pleasure and the experience that we have had as a team, feeling that it's quite refreshing working in economic mobility, where the refugees are working with us as partners to find solutions, to find durable solutions to their problem, as opposed to when, you know, we just offer and they have very minimal participation. It's been an honor personally, just and so fulfilling to observe the resilient hope of refugees in action. I mean, just looking at how much education they have gathered and the experience that they have gathered within the community offering their services while they're still in asylum, despite incommensurate pay and unclear career development paths. I would say that what to me feels like economic mobility says is we applaud you, we see you. And I believe that economic mobility as a pathway is definitely clearing away the ceiling for these refugees. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentine. Very well said. Valentine has tried to summarize a screening process to make it look simple, but it is so multi-layers, has so many steps. While the aim of our screening is to make sure that we get a perfect fit for a job position, we are not blind to the fact that we are working with refugees. So we want to make sure that we are not just matching a position to a candidate, but making sure, because this is the context of the displacement or refugee context, that there are certain peculiarities about working with refugees that are being considered and are being applied through the screening and in the identification of a durable solution. So for some clients, we may put them through resettlement because we believe it is a much stronger protection solution or a durable solution than an economic pathway. And speaking to how heartwarming this process has been, I think just working with clients, we were very excited in 2019. We've always known there's a lot in terms of refugee talent here, and that's not exclusive to Kenya alone. And just seeing the reactions of employers when they put through their candidates and how well they have performed in the interviews and the outcomes where job offers are concerned. Part of our screening also involves checking in with UNHCR, the village I spoke about, one of our key partners, which has just made sure that yes, in as much as it's a relocation, this is an economic pathway, so we want to make sure that we are taking into consideration aspects of protection, aspects of family composition, and just making sure, as Valentine said, that an economic pathway makes for the best solution for that candidate. Now, I will invite John Bosco to kindly unmute. We're going to hear from his experience as a client who is currently going through this process. What has this process meant for you? Share with us your experience being actively involved in the search for durable solutions through your skills and experiences and us. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. This process means a lot to me as a refugee. This process is a blessing to me and to other refugees here in Kenya and in other parts of the Africa or the world, because this process has given me dignity as a person. It will allow me to shed off the tag of refugee. Again, it will give me a new home where I will live peacefully and in an atmosphere that will allow me to care for my family. Secondly, this program EMPP will allow me to continue practicing my nursing skills. This will again permit me to cater for my family, to cater for my needs, and it will allow me also to join hands with other healthcare providers in a host country, where I will join hands with them in improving, in maintaining the healthcare needs in Canadian community. And it is my wish and my prayer that this process will be a success for me and for other refugees. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you very much. I failed to mention that both John Bosco and Bahati were part of our first group of candidates during the pilot. And Bahati, having arrived in Canada, Kindly share with us your perspective, having gone through the process here in Kenya, what you have observed after your arrival and integration and now as your work life in Canada. And yeah, just let us know how you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Janet, and everyone. I'm doing great. Fall is getting prettier by the day, the changing colors. And I guess having come here in summer, we are really adjusting to now the weather as it's changing. So now it's more like Nairobi weather, not too bad. But we are doing well. Thanks for asking. And about just being here from um, the whole journey and the whole process, I think it's very amazing. And I keep saying this, but I don't know how much I can emphasize it, that this whole process, the EMPP as a pathway, as a refugee who has been a refugee for more than 20 years, I have observed it to be very dignifying, which is something that we don't see a lot in refugee processes, and also very empowering. And one thing that attracts me to this process, and I think would speak to a lot of refugees, is that it's not anchored on the refugee status. I did not have to do numerous interviews to justify my refugee claim and defend it and relive it every time, just so that countries can accept my claim and accept me as a resettled refugee there. None of that was needed. All I needed to do was provide my credentials, my work experience, and present my skills. So I think that was a very different approach to how things have been done, and it is working and it is very dignifying. And then another thing I appreciated is that having come here, it's very evident even in the workplace and in the people that I am interacting with, that no one is doing me any favors, or no one did me any favor by participating in the process for me and others to come here, but actually that I am here because I am needed and that my skills are needed. And again, this is not something that we see a lot in how refugees are handled. And so being a nurse in the place where I work is something that is very respected. No one cares where I am from or my immigration status where I was, to be honest. No one asks about it. They just hear that you're a nurse and instantly you are respected because they know that you have put a lot of work into building those credentials. You do have to go to school to align your credentials with the system here, but there is that acknowledgement of the effort and time that you have put into that degree. So I really appreciate that. Also, I think all the stakeholders and partners who were involved in the whole process put a lot of work into preparing us for coming here, and I found that it was very instrumental and very useful to help us adapt to the systems. They are quite different from what we have been used to. Coming from a context where you are a refugee and treated as such, to a context where you are not, you are treated like anyone else. It's actually quite an adjustment. So the support on this end has been very tremendous, but it has been great. Also, it did help to feel like a partner in the whole process, as Janet has mentioned, and also have direct contact with the employer all the way. It wasn't RefugePoint or UNHCR or others that were filling in the forms or attending the meetings for me. No, everyone going through the process does that all on their own. And so you feel like the power is in your hands. Whatever you do, you have control, you have contact with the employers. RefugePoint and others are just there to facilitate, maybe where resources may be scarce, just because of the context we're in while in Africa. And so all of that, I think, just comes together into process that is very encouraging and enabling for everyone who is planning to go through it. Yeah, thank you, Janet. Back to you.
Thank you, Bahati. I recall initially as RefugePoint, this was also new for us. And it's been so encouraging when we were conducting outreaches in 2018 just to gauge the level of information awareness about economic pathways and whether refugees would be interested or willing to engage in it. And just despite the very limited information we as an agency and generally what we observed within the community was lacking, there was such an overwhelming interest to participate in the EMPP. And so, and that has not waned. And it really does speak for just the level of partnership that we have received and just the level of trust that you and our clients, and we are hoping that all things going well, we will be able to depart way more refugees into different communities. Now allow me to invite a key ally, very early learning during the pilot. What we observed is that the process for this process to be successful, it really needed to be employer-led, and we needed to establish strong partnerships and connections in Canada. And Sarah played a key role there. So I will kindly invite her to unmute herself and let us know her observations as she engaged on the Canadian side.
Thanks, Janet. First of all, I live in the community where Bahati has settled and where Jean Bosco will be coming. And I'm glad to hear she's enjoying our weather now. And I hope she holds that enthusiasm in January when we are covered in snow as well. Look, thinking about my observations, the first is very simple, which is that this is a program that makes sense. That's obviously an oversimplification. There are many complexities to it, especially when we get into documents and red tape and immigration paperwork and all of those complicating factors. But in its simplest terms, this is just a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of model. Here in Canada, and especially disproportionately on the eastern side of Canada, we have labor shortages with employers. We've got a disproportionately high percentage of an aging population and a workforce that's shrinking. And at the same time, we're seeing population declines with smaller families. And so what that means on the employer side is, whether we're talking about small mom and pop businesses or large national corporations, and whether they're in status quo mode or in growth mode, we have businesses who cannot fill vacancies in their workplace. They cannot find the workers that they need. And we're seeing that in positions across all sectors and in positions with a variety of skill levels as well. So at the same time that we have those employers with labor shortages, we know, having gone through this pilot, that within that refugee population, there are many, many individuals who can meet the language skill requirement levels, have the right skills, have the right kind of training and education, and even the right kind of work experience to be able to meet the immigration criteria. So we've got employers on one side with needs, and we've got refugee candidates that fit those needs. What we haven't had, or what those candidates have not had, is the right kind of opportunity to access the pathways to immigration. And so that's why, in its very simple terms, what this program does is allow the connection between those employers with the needs and the candidates who have the right kind of skills. Janet touched on as well, and so did Bahati, the importance of this being an employer-led and economically driven project. All of the employers that we've worked with up to this point, we've had that clear and transparent conversation. If an employer is interested in engaging in the refugee space for humanitarian reasons, there are other ways for them to do that. This specific project is economically driven. It's focused on what are the shortages in the workplace, what are the skills that employer needs and identifies, and then how do we find those candidates who are bringing those skills to the table. So as Bahati said, it's not about doing anyone any favors. The first employer that we worked with was very purposeful in making sure everyone knew the interview process happened just as it always does. Questions weren't changed, thresholds weren't lowered. In fact, they said not only did the candidates they interviewed, and that includes both Jean Bosco and Bahati, not only did they meet the expectations, they far exceeded it. And they said in many cases, even exceeded the typical talent pool that they would find with local calls because of the shortages that they're facing. So that's just a really important piece to keep in the back of the mind for anyone who's looking at this program. If it has to be employer-led and economically driven, if we're not just looking for a short-term fix and recruitment and job matching, but really something that's a sustainable model, because the candidates are going to be coming to workplaces that they'll be successful in and communities that they're properly settled and integrated in as well.
Thank you. You make an important point about it being employer-led and a win-win situation. The employer needs to be more than satisfied that the candidate who is going to aptly meet an economic need for an employee. While on our end, you want to make sure that this particular pathway does provide a sustainable or a durable solution within the confines of what is possible in the refugee context. So allow me to now invite John Bosco to unmute himself. And please tell us, having engaged in this program, having interacted with refugees in Nairobi, what do you think we can do to increase access to labor mobility to refugees in general?
Yeah, thank you, Janet. I am a refugee in Kenya. I know many refugees. We interact more. So when they heard that I am participating in the MPP, they were eager to know about it. They were eager to get registered, but because RefugePoint and in the letters they gave us, I told them there is a process to follow, and that at the moment, healthcare is the section of the employment that they are taking care of. I encourage them to wait. The program is still new. There are many opportunities coming. So as refugee that we relate, that we meet on every day, they are eager to become active participants in this program. Now, it is my request that in order to increase the number, in order to allow many refugees to participate, RefugePoint here in Nairobi and other stakeholders, where in Canada or in Europe, they can continue looking or searching for many opportunities in order they can enroll more refugees. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention that we will hopefully have a Q&A session in the end, time allowing. So if you have any questions to any of the panelists, please feel free to either use the chat or the Q&A session. All right. I posed the same question, but to Valentine, so she can bring out a staff perspective. As I experienced as RefugePoint, what have we observed as some of the barriers to economic mobility for refugees, and what can be done to increase access or scale up this pathway? Welcome.
Thank you, Janet. From our perspective, we have had two major challenges that we've observed, and those are the only two that I'll be speaking about in this section. One of them has been the difficulty in meeting immigration requirements, as Sarah alluded to earlier. Documents are hard to come by for refugees. They lost some of them during flight and cannot even reach out and ask for more due to protection reasons and protection needs. So they have challenges to access, documents that will provide evidence of education, evidence of their work experience. And while these is a huge challenge, there's been an opportunity here. And, we'll just thank Canada again for being a pioneer with the new immigration policies that are kind of offering some flexibilities that will make immigration more refugee accessible. Of course, here the opportunity, again, as I'll just mention, is to offer some flexibilities, in terms how do we determine, or how do we collect the evidence of their education, the evidence of their work experience, without going towards the traditional must provide certificates, must provide testimonials and references. The second challenge, and this sounds a bit ironic considering Bahati and the other, Marty mentioned that 4 candidates are already settled in Canada and 3 of those are female. However, from this side of things, the female candidates do not make it to 25%. And that's a challenge that we are noting, that, we have fewer female candidates uptaking this program. And I think there are some complexities to that. One of them being a disproportionate uptake of education and work experience. Speaking with one of the candidates earlier, she mentioned displeasure expressed by her community members that she was going back to school to advance her education. She's supposed to be home taking care of her family. And while that is well and okay, the challenge that we're seeing here is that it disadvantages them when it's time to re-enter the workforce. They have now what we're looking at as expired experience, and, or maybe haven't had up-to-date education in terms of what employers are looking for. And again, I'll just mention that an opportunity here is just to be creative, in terms of how can we gather the evidence that they have that work experience, or that they will qualify to do the job that is being required, and perhaps maybe even look at a targeted approach in recruitment of women. All in all, I mean, there is definitely a supply on this side. Janet said that already. John Bosco has mentioned, the eagerness that is there among us refugees to uptake this program. So I think the biggest challenge to all of us and the opportunities that have been presented here is to really just create and develop a consistent demand that makes this program refugee accessible. Over to you, Janet.
Thank you. And yeah, you raise really critical points. That there is talent is not a question. That talent meets the need of employers, there is no question about that. I think both the pilot and this particular project has proven that. But one distinction that we need to make, as opposed to traditional resettlement, candidates need to meet, because this is an economic pathway. And for the experience with Canada, they need to meet the provincial requirements for immigration. So beyond getting a job offer and satisfying an employer that they can get their job done, they need to make sure that they meet the provincial requirements for any particular province, so that they can get a nomination for them to go and live in that province. And that has been where we have observed to be some of the barriers. I think in the end we really speak to positive steps. We are not by any means the expert. We are still learning. We are still applying what we have learned to redesign, to rethink and recreate the program. And we're so grateful that following the pilot, there are some initial learnings about some of these barriers. And the Canadian government has gone ahead to implement policy and facilitation measures to try and address them. But that, from my personal experience, has been, a candidate has a job, but then now the bigger issue, are they able to meet the economic requirements for them to immigrate? And I think that's where now the greatest work needs to be done, because we have already proved that refugees can go, but this is probably what it will take to increase access, not just in Kenya, but beyond. So now allow me to invite Bahati, the same question from your perspective, and if you can infuse anything just about your experience having arrived and settled, what is your message to the parties here and to the actors about what we can do to increase access to other refugees? Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. And very key points have been raised by both John Bosco and Val. Um, it is indeed true that we have a lot of resource in within the refugee community, and there's data to back that up. Uh, and despite the limitations that we have, and I guess that's where the barriers come in, you know, trying to understand or resign ourselves to the fact that refugees may have the skills, yes, but showing them on paper may not be possible. And I remember one experience when I was applying for the job I had in Nairobi. They asked me for a birth certificate so that they could pay me. And I had to go to the supervisor and explain why I do not have a birth certificate and actually get them to accept an alternative. So I think one of the biggest tasks that we have and you all have as stakeholders is take an advocacy role. And I'm happy that we have few of us who are here and can be able to show that despite the documentation challenges, um, people are still able to deliver and use that as data and as points for advocacy for, as Val has said, some level of flexibility. And just figuring out with immigration or other stakeholders any alternatives that can be worked around, and then use that as a model to scale and just pass these barriers. I am not a lawyer, but I know Sarah is. But one of the things that I have learned to appreciate as a refugee is loopholes, but ethical loopholes. So I would actually advocate for looking for ethical loopholes and using them as advocacy points, because I think these are places where there's room for flexibility and there's room for just coming to an agreement and just being able to mold that to fit the refugee context. Another example I would use is, for if you are hiring a refugee, say in Kenya or in Ethiopia, where we have policies that really do not encourage refugee employment, you have to kind of find loopholes, for example, different ways to pay refugees without, just taking the opportunity away from them altogether, just because they're not able, for example, to access bank accounts. You can use maybe mobile banking or somewhere else. So that's a loophole that has been used ethically to empower other people. Yeah. And also something mentioned about people who have the right documentation but lack experience. I have seen and experienced that the traditional resettlement method takes quite a while. Maybe 2 years at the minimum, and I know RefugePoint, you understand this very well. And I think that for this particular stream, we can take that amount of time or less into priming people to meet these requirements that are required maybe for provincial nominations. And I do believe that we can also go and explore the express pathway, because we have refugees who are bilingual, who have the experience, who have the qualifications, but lack the resources to be able to sponsor themselves through this process. So just being able to intentionally work with people who have, let's say, the documentation, but lack the experience, to go through them through a 1 year process, maybe facilitate or support where necessary with the experience. And then after that 1 year, you know that they have the qualifications. Something else that Sarah and I guess the team are working on is sharing the course for the exact position that is needed here in Canada with others who do not have, say, the experience or necessarily the nursing degree, and just have them go through that and seek qualifications through that and advocate for that to be acceptable as qualification. Another thing that I had thought of to be able to scale up and just increase the demand, and maybe one way that you can target specific demographics that you're looking for, say if it's women. I think that if you if you partner and work with organizations that provide scholarships for refugees and find out those who are in the right stream, that are on the path to qualify for a position that would allow them to work here, and actually work through them, I think it will be a way to give power in their hands, and they know what they're working towards. And, just as a way to give them hope and encouragement, because I find that a lot of people lose hope along the way because they think, I'm studying nursing or I'm getting a diploma in the health field, but then what next? Am I going to get a work permit? Maybe, maybe not. And so all of that is discouraging. Maybe your grades will fall. But if you have something to look forward to, I think that is great motivation for people to even work beyond the stress, work beyond the harsh environments that they're living in, just to be able to make it, from there. And also something that I know I would be willing to do, and those of us who are here, is just make ourselves available to be contacts, and to be able to form friendships with those who are in the pipeline and almost coming here, to be able to answer any questions. I know that is something I wished that I had. And of course, one thing that I loved is we were able to talk with Sarah and the other volunteers from the support systems here, to be able to just try and understand what to expect. But it's different when you hear it from someone who has gone through the process themselves, and just hear things from their perspective, hear their struggles and how they have overcome them. So I think that would be a great way to also give power to those who are applying, give them something to look forward to, and take any anxieties they may have and actually add onto the excitement of the whole process.
Thank you, Bahati. I think for us as RefugePoint, beyond working individually with clients and ensuring that if possible, we can scale up or increase access as much as we can, a much bigger outcome for us would be to inform the process in a refugee-centered way. We are realizing that some of these barriers, for example, where requirements, immigration requirements are concerned, disproportionately affect refugees because of the context of their flight. They do not carry documents. The conditions in the country of asylum do not necessarily allow for one to continue in their occupation or obtain or maintain their documentation. So a really, really big part of why we are involved is to lend our voices towards making sure, because these are pathways that are accessible to anyone. This is, I think, the first time that we are putting in refugees. And so we are hoping that we would be able to make sure that the particular contextualities that refugees face are infused and used to inform those programs, and probably drive policy in a way that I think the dream would be for refugees to be able to independently apply and have access, as long as that they are able to make those connections with their employers. So I will now invite Sarah to answer the same question and say, can you describe how this program gives access to Canadian immigration streams? And are you seeing a demand for skilled refugee candidates in Canada?
Sure, thanks, Janet. I think it's important to explain, first of all, that this is not a new stream of its own. What's happening here is that the Canadian government has worked really hard and looked at some policy changes to try and level the playing field between refugees who normally face barriers and other candidates who might apply from any other country to immigrate to Canada. But these candidates are all still coming through traditional immigration streams that have the same kind of requirements around language level, the skills, training, and work experience. I'll give you an example, though, of the type of way that there might be some flexibility and policy changes happening. Is, let's say there's an immigration stream that normally would require a candidate to have, say, 12 months of work experience within the last 3 years. So there are policy changes being talked about that might say, well, perhaps for a refugee candidate, maybe the last 3 years is too narrow of a window and that can be expanded. So those are the types of things that our federal government has looked at, and we've had some really wonderful collaborative conversations and creative solutions just to try and level the playing field between refugee candidates and others. In terms of the demand, I come back to it just makes sense. And honestly, one of the only place that there's been a challenge in engaging employers at the front end is that often the word refugee itself carries with it a lot of stereotypes and misinformation and misperceptions. As soon as employers understand that we're speaking about people who have the skills, language, and work experience and just happen to be refugees, the employers who are looking to fill labor shortages and unable to fill those labor shortages don't need a lot of convincing to come to the table. Certainly, especially in the early stages of the pilot, there's been a lot of unpredictability around what does the process look like and how long does it take. But with each candidate that has landed and each time there's been an effort to kind of clarify that process a bit more, it's become easier and easier to engage. So frankly, I think the demand just holds a lot of really exciting potential, and we're starting to look at other sectors and other regions as well. So really excited about what the future holds.
Thank you, Sarah. And those are exactly the sentiments we have. It's taken a village, it's taken us years. Unfortunately, because of COVID, a lot of activities were appended. But the pilot revealed that the future is really, really bright. We are so excited, very grateful at what we see as opportunities to widen and scale up access to durable solutions. And this is a viable pathway. So I speak on my own behalf, and having been part of this project since 2018, looking at prospects for tomorrow, I've been so encouraged working with employers who have previously never engaged refugees before, and they come to the table so excited, so willing to learn, so adaptable, and really wanting to engage. And that has really reaffirmed our hope that yes, that there is, as a community of nations, there's definitely such a lot of partnership towards exploring and bringing on board new ideas. I would also just, as a wrap-up, want to thank everyone who has been part of our our EMPP story here at RefugePoint. We started off with the IRCC, TBB, UNHCR, IOM. We've onboarded so many agencies that have never worked with refugees before, the British Council, Sarah Wiseman, and then many provinces and territories in Canada who have showed us such partnerships and have been such allies and collaborators. And so I don't think I can end it on a sounder note than that, but just to say that we are really excited. This EMPP is not exclusive to Kenya. It's Canada's model for labor mobility, and we are available to lend any support and any help where possible about scaling or even exploring opportunities in different locations. We have 5 minutes, so allow me to very quickly go through the chart and invite our panelists to respond to some of the questions. Okay, the one question that was asked was whether the EMPP is specific to Kenya only, or could be accessible to refugees in other locations. Mati, would you like to respond to that?
Janet, I added an answer in the chat, including a link to other resources.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So we will share for refugees who are in Kenya, we will share with you what our screening process and what the application process looks like. But for now, allow us to say thank you once again for your participation. Thank you for taking the time to come and hear about our observations and experience. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in. Special thanks to Bahati and John Bosco for taking your time. And it's been such a pleasure. And without any other questions, we would like to say thank you. Thank you very much. And have yourselves a really, really good day.